and learn session about search. I hope everybody can hear me well. If not, please let me know through the chat functionality, which you can find on the bottom of the GoToWebinar widget that is on your screen. So this session we'll talk about searching. We also have scheduled some other lunch and learn sessions. You can see the agenda on the community. If you have an interest in any other session, then please let us know through the community and we can organize additional sessions on other topics. This session is about search. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Daniel Schuuring. I'm Director of Product Management and Product Marketing. And besides spending my time in the R&D department, I also spent a lot of time with clients discussing strategies to do their investigation, search, and setting up the ZyLAB systems. In this session, I want to go through a little bit of the, let's say, the syntax of the searches, what's possible with the ZyLAB search. And after that, I want to show you how I normally work with setting up searches, and then we're going to be a little bit more practical. The first part, I will go quickly through the slides. All information will be posted on the community, so you can read it afterwards. And I anticipate that some of you already are aware of some of the search functionalities in ZyLAB. So let's start with this session. So important to understand is what is actually indexed. So if we have some document text here like hello, my name is Daniel, then our index will contain hello, my name is Daniel as separate words on which you can search. So far so good, not that difficult. If you have words that are using a dash, like for example here using auto classification, then what we do with auto classification, we index that in separate terms. So we will use auto, we will use classification, auto classification, auto dash classification. So you can search on 4 different ways on this word. Also want to tell you a little bit about the numbers that we index. For example, he pays me $1,000. We will index all the words. We will index also the currency symbols. And besides that, the amounts that are mentioned, the currencies, will be listed as 1,000, including the separator symbols. But we also list as 1,000 as a number, so you can use the numeric ranges that the search engine offers. Now, depending on your regional settings, if you're in the US, and your system is set up with the US regional settings, then what we will do, we will use the US syntax to convert the 1,000 separators to a number. Now we have a lot of different searches that are possible. I will go over some of these a little bit more detail. I suspect you already know some of these. Important to understand is that we have some reserved characters that we use in our query syntax. Like the quotes, the question mark, the asterisk, the plus sign, and all these characters are used in our search expressions. So with these you can set up a search syntax. Also important to understand is that there are some words that we are using also in a query syntax like and or not, which are kind of obvious, but also of, into, those words are considered to be reserved words as they're part of the query syntax. And if you want to search on reserved words, what you can do is you can put quotes around the word and then it will be part of the search. So if you want to search for Bank of America, you will need to put quotes around the word or the term of. So those are little basics. We can search on single terms. If you quote a sentence, we will also see that as a single term. So in the examples at the bottom in red, this is a single term. That's a kind of a sentence, but because it's quoted, we see that as one term. Now, important to understand are some of the wildcard options that we have. We have the the asterisk, we have the question mark, but also, and some people don't know that well, is that we can also use a range of characters. So in the first example that you see, when we search for man with an A or an E, and you can say, okay, we have a different for the third or the second letter. The system can choose to use an A or an E, and we'll find man or man. So these are all possible, and we'll use those character ranges later on as well in our query that we're going to create. Now the fuzzy syntax, very important. We use the tilde sign with 1, 2, 3, or 4, and the number defines the fuzzy degree, and then we can find all the variations of the word. Numeric operators, if you want to search for numbers, let's say all numbers larger than 1,000,000, you can use the largest sign and then write down 1,000,000 in numbers, and then we'll find that you can also find exact numbers, or say I don't want to find all, I want to find all documents that don't have a certain number. So this is all possible, and we will convert amounts to numbers as well. You can also search for a range, a numeric range. So you have the larger than 1984 and smaller than 2012. You will find all documents that match, have a match in between. Now, regular expressions are becoming more and more important. This is also part of the search engine, and regular expressions, we can use that for pattern search. Especially with digits, it's commonly used to find credit card numbers, but also, for example, to find social security numbers. And especially for redaction purposes, this is a very useful syntax, so that you can specify certain patterns, numeric patterns, or word patterns, and then have these, for example, redacted automatically. And we'll go through this as well later on. One thing which I think is also very interesting one is the fact that you can also exclude terms from the hits. Let's say, for example, at the bottom, we search for anything that starts with an apple. So we have the Apple wildcard search. But what we want is that we don't want hits of the word apple. So any variation like apple cake, apple pie, those will be hits, but we don't want to have a hit on Apple itself. So you can exclude hits from your search using the exclusion operator. Now, Boolean operators I think are quite clear. We have the not operator, the and the or. But I do want to talk a little bit about the quorum operator. And the quorum operator allows you to have a list of queries or terms, and you can say how many of these queries or terms have to match in order for the document to be a hit. So in the examples, the first one, for example, we say 2 of apple, coconut, banana, sugar, means that we want 2 of these words to be a hit in the document. And these can be words like apple, coconut, banana, but these can also be queries. So you can also have a list of queries in a quorum search and say, well, at least 2 or 3 of these queries should have a match for the document. And this is actually a very easy way to convert lists into queries. If you have a large list of, for example, names, you can easily convert this to a quorum search and use the quorum parameter to find the names in this query. Now, positional operators, I like those as well. You can have an ordered list or an unordered list. Let's go first to the ordered proximity. That means that we search in this example for a sweet that should be a maximum of 2 words in front of cake. So that means, and you can of course change the parameter. So you search for words that are in front of another word. It can be sometimes very useful. If you use just a P, it is sweet should be somewhere in the document in front of cake. Now, I use personally often the unordered proximity operator, the within operator. And this operator will allow me to search, for example, for sweet within one word of cake, and then sweet or cake is the hit, or cake sweet. And this is what I commonly use to find relations. You can also use the and, but then the hit can be, one word can be at the beginning of the document, the other at the end of the document. But using this proximity, you can make sure that the words are more related to each other. You can also put the range, so you can exactly specify how many words they should be apart from each other. So that's also an option. Now, what I also use often is, for example, a query that I want to search within a paragraph or within a certain sentence. I want to find two words which are in one sentence, or two words which are in one paragraph. So I'm sure that these words are related to each other. Then I can use the EOS or the EOP operator. EOS stands for end of sentence, and EOP stands for end of paragraph. And that allows me to easily find also related words which are in one paragraph. And we have a couple of more of these operators. Now, the final one is that you can also search for words which are in between certain words. And these are useful for, let's say, structured documents, where you always have a fixed structure. Then you can use certain terms as for a certain location in the document, and between these locations you want to find a certain word or term. So in this case, I search for "dear to regards." So between those words, there should be the word Mandy to be a hit. Now let's start creating a query. And as an example, what I normally do, I always start with some data swimming in the documents that I have. It's depending a little bit on the case or the matter at hand, if it's an investigative case or it's a little bit more standard. But you always want to view a few of the documents first to get an understanding of the data that you're working with. Now, in this case, I would like to find all the contracts that have an amount. So I have two questions: what's typical for a contract, and how do I define an amount? Because basically my query will consist of two parts: locating a contract and then locating within the contract an amount. Now let's start here with the contract. Now, what kind of words can we find in a contract? Now, of course, contract, agreement, parties, term, and if you're international, you can also use the translations of these words in your query. And you can even use Google Translate in combination with Google Spreadsheets to automatically translate all your keywords and add these to your query. So in the contract, I have these type of words, and normally in a contract, I also have at the end of a contract, I have keywords like date, date signed, signature, signed by, name, place, title, company, corporation. So those are typically keywords that are available in a contract. So what I want to do is I want to use these keywords in a query. Now, it's not always that you have contract and agreement in a query. And if you take a look at first the blue part of the query, you will see that I've got here a quorum search where I say, okay, I want to have one word from this list, and the list is contract, anything that ends on agreement, term, and the Dutch word. So that's the first part. This is how I locate the first part of the contract. Then I want to combine this with the AND relation, and this AND relation, with that I would like to find keywords that are at the bottom of a contract. And so signature, signed, handtekening, agree or agreed, by, and those words should be close to date, place, title, name, because that's where normally the signature is placed in the contract. And of course, you can make all kinds of variations here. This is a simple example, but this is how I would like to find my initial contracts. Now, how am I going to find an amount? Because that's the second part of the query. So I've written down some notations on how amounts are typically written down in contracts. Sometimes people use the currency symbol in front of the number, or the currency symbol is behind the number. Some write down USD 300, they use the decimal signs, the thousand separators, so there are all kinds of variations there. So what I want to do, I want to create a pattern that finds all these different relations. Now, first of all, I've got the amount query that I'm going to create. You see at the first line amount, you see the very long query that has different parts. Now, let me use the highlighter here. Let's see if this works. What you see here is the first part, which is here, 0 to 9 plus, means that I want to find any number with at least one numerical character, 0 to 9, and that should be repeated. So this can be any number which is connected to each other. Now I also want to find the numbers using decimals or thousand separators. So that's why I have in between a question mark, and then I find these type of patterns. And then I continue this, I just copy paste, add another one, and we'll find these. So I can continue this until I have got about 5 of these patterns behind each other to find even the millions. Now also for currency, I have created a query, one of Euro, USD, British pounds, and then the symbols. Or I can use this also as a pattern search in combination with the amount number. So if I combine this, I get a query like this, where the first part that you see is looking for the number within 3 words of a currency sign. And I also have the option to search for a number with attached the currency symbol. So these are the variations that I've listed in this query. So I've got the amount query now, and I've got the contract query. So if I combine these with an AND, I get this query. And now this looks really complex and a very full slide with lots of words. But let's go to the software itself. I've got here the ZyLAB 1 interface, which is the new interface of the ZyLAB product. I can go to the browse option. And what I've done here is that I already got the saved query, which is the contract with the amount. And you can see here the whole query, which is executed. And then if I go to the result list, what you will see are here the results. And if I scroll a little bit down, for example, I think this is probably an agreement. You will see that in this document we'll have all the hits highlighted with agreement, and also somewhere in here, I think, yeah, here it is. You will see that we have here the amount that we have found. So there's an amount in here with all the other details of the document. And you see here signed by, that's also a hit. Now going back to the presentation. Here I've got some Social Security number queries, which is Social Security with a wildcard and all kinds of variations. And I'm looking for this query in combination with a numerical pattern. And And let's execute this one also in the system. And I think I have that one here. This is the query for social security number. You see we already have the new hits. And what it will show you here are the hits with the social security. There they are. So you see that we can find now easily the social security numbers. So this is another pattern that we have available. Now you can make any types of queries. I've got some samples here. I will publish these on the community so you can download them and use them yourself. As an example, I've got for months. I also got one for dates, where I use all kinds of dates formats. For all the non-Latin words, if you are interested in that. But also, for example, I've got a query for holidays. And the holidays query will allow me to find, for example, all the calendar items that are part of a holiday and exclude them, for example, from all the documents or delete them. So you can find these as well. Now, the query length is actually pretty large. You can actually put a lot of data into one query. I think up to 6 pages of A4 with query language is able to be posted into a query. Another thing which is interesting, I think, is that there's on the internet a lot of examples of data. There was an article published by someone that showed on what words and topics Goldman Sachs auditing department was searching in the email from the traders. Now there's a large list that you can view. What I did with this list, that I converted it to ZyLAB queries, which is not that difficult. I've got here the full list. So, and there are queries like these. There appears to be several mistakes, for example. And all these kinds of queries are in here. This is not fair. And the auditing department gets triggered by these words and sentences, sentiments that are in these queries. And one of the nice things about the new ZyLAB 1 software is that I can copy, for example, this whole set of queries. And in the system, if I go to home, I have now a batch search option. And I can just paste my queries here and execute them. And what it will do, it will execute all these queries and show me how many hits I have for these documents, for these queries, sorry. So you see that some queries actually have a hit on the annual data, which I'm searching in. So charged too much excessively actually has a hit in the annual data set. So that data is available. One other thing I want to show you is that you can also leverage Excel or Word to help you build queries. I've got here an example list of some keywords, some names I want to look for, and I can copy these. And what I've done in this Word document, I can just paste these words in here. I can paste large lists in here, and I've created a simple macro that makes sure that the query syntax is used and that converts the list into an OR query. So this is now a simple OR query, just with one click on the button, convert to OR query. It converts this list to an OR search. And also will exclude if you have AND or not in there in your list, or to, or what. It will make sure that these have quotations around them. Now I also have another option that is an Excel sheet, which we'll publish too. And this Excel sheet allows you to convert also lists into ZyLAB searches. And what you can do is you can put in here your list, copy the keywords, you can modify them here if you want, review them, and then what it automatically does, it creates for each keyword, it creates a query. And it will create a quorum search of all your queries. So if you go at the bottom, you will see how many data you have, how many queries you have. You can change here the quorum parameter if you want, and then you can just copy and paste this into your search. And it also will generate an OR query. And if you want, there are also options in this sheet to convert email addresses into searches, and then searches in the metadata or searches in full text. Now, I've also published this query sheet on the community, so you can download it and use this yourself. So let's go back to, I think, the last slide. I hope that I have given you a little bit of interesting information in these 13 minutes. I will publish all the data on the community. I think it's even already there, so you can download the information there. If you have any questions, you can send them to me by email, which is also in the presentation, but you can always reach me through the community. If you have an urgent question now, you can ask them through the chat. And if not, I would like to thank you all for listening to me. And I hope you have a very nice afternoon. I don't see any questions popping up, so thank you very much.